is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
A delayed and divisive presidential election in Somalia that fielded 36 candidates ended with a triumphant comeback of President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud. For Hassan Sheikh, who also served as president between 2012 to 2017, the corridors of power may be familiar. But the challenges remain ever so daunting, with deepening insecurity and a severe state of drought. So what plan does he have for these challenges? What will he do differently this time around? And what does the future hold for Somalia? I'm Beatrice Marshall. Welcome to Talk Africa. In Somalia, newly elected President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud has officially assumed office at a ceremony in the capital, Mogadishu. The former president, Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo, has handed over the power to his successor, Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, who was elected as the 10th president in the May 15th election. Our correspondent, Mohamed Kahie, has the details.
Somalia's newly elected President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud officially received the instrument of power to lead the Horn of African nation for the next 4 years. Former President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo, who vacated the official residence, pledged his support for the new government.
The president is working for the people, therefore we need to unite and support his work, because our country is recuperating from a long civil war. Thus, 1 or 2 people are not enough for the work. I will personally promise to stand by you, support you, and wish you good luck.
The new president appealed for the support from the citizens in order to get the work done.
I am requesting for your support and full confidence, as you did before, while appreciating the assurance of the outgoing president. There are huge tasks awaiting us, including the content in the files I received here today, and I cannot do it alone unless I get support from the people.
Somali citizens have hailed the peaceful transfer of power.
We made a lot of progress, and one thing that I would say is the political maturity. Even though there's a lot of differences among the states and differences of political views, when it comes to elections in Somalia, the power transfer is something that other countries should take notice, especially dictator countries. And we look forward to Somalia actually transition to one person, one vote in 2026.
Like with any new official coming into office, expectations are very high.
The first task for a new president is the appointment of a new prime minister. I would like him to point to a youthful prime minister who can work for this country and its people and work towards progressing our country. The president also needs to resolve political differences resulting from the aftermath of the elections.
President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud has promised to implement tangible policies in his first 100 days in office. What remains to be seen now is his choice of prime minister in the next coming days. Mohamed Kahie, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Well, let's now bring in our panel, all joining us via Zoom. Joining us in Nairobi, Samira Gaid, Regional and Security Analyst for Somalia and Horn of Africa region. Joining us from Mombasa, Dr. Hassan Kanenji, Director of the Horn International Institute for Strategic Studies, and from Washington, D.C., William Lawrence, Professor of Political Science and International Affairs at the American University. A warm welcome to you all, and thank you for joining us on Talk Africa today. Samira, first off, let me start off with you, because Somalia's presidential election has finally been held after being delayed for more than a year. What do you make of this?
Was 15 months delayed, but even before that, you know, that the 15 months was when the president was supposed to have vacated office. So it has really resulted in a very divided country, polarized nation, and we're all happy that it's come to an end. We now have a former president taking the helm. He is known as a unifier. His campaign slogan was Somalia at peace with itself and with its neighbors. So everyone's hopeful, but this is usually the trend. We're hopeful in the first 3 to 6 months, and then, start looking at the person more closely.
Professor Lawrence, Somalia seems to be hopeful for the moment. Is this a sign of political maturity? Is Somalia, do you think, on the mend?
I think it's a sign of maturity of the political class, which brought Somalia out of the political crisis that my colleague so aptly described. But we don't have one man, one vote democracy yet. So we don't have that level of maturity, which is the wish of most Somalians. And if the, let's say, security and political situation in the country had been better, we would have been able to take that next step. I think it's been 50 years since we had a proper one man, one vote system, although we have a version of it up in Somaliland. But I think the first thing is to get political stability and national stability and security, and then we'll be able to take the next steps towards what Somalians really want, which is a government they control, as part of the national polity and the national will.
Right. Dr. Kaneji, let me come back to that point of universal suffrage, because, Somalia's democracy is rather unique in that way, because since 2012, the idea has been to have universal suffrage. But again, it was the clan elders who picked the leader. We do know that under these circumstances, every new election produces a newcomer. Does the choice generally represent the people's wishes?
Conventionally, you expect that one man, one vote will be the most representative form of government, of course, which has not happened yet. And that is explained by the certain structural and institutional factors or deficiencies within Somalia that cannot allow a very peaceful and successful one man, one vote. The current situation, for instance, of the ground is that the security, the factionalization of the security services itself, the kind of almost political balkanization of the country makes it virtually impossible to actually organize an election in a way that is going to be representative. And yes, it is not sufficient, but I think it's better than nothing.
Samira, is this representative? What's your thought?
It's definitely not representative, especially when it comes to women and marginalized communities. It's not the best way forward. With this indirect election, what you have is those with money and access to power or access to weapons are the ones who usually bully their way into the seats. It leaves a lot of our people disgruntled, continuing on with the 20-30 years of the civil war. A lot of people, young people, are left out of the process. That's why we have this big group of young people joining Alshabab or other groups such as Alshabab. So we're all hopeful that this could change to one person, one vote, but I also see the complexities in our structure. We have adopted a federal system, but in reality, like you just mentioned, the doctor just mentioned, we have this balkanization and federal member states that are sometimes stronger than the center, they all have constitutions that need to be revisited. We need to agree on resource and power sharing. Right. So there's a lot of more political work to be done before we can get to one person, one vote. And we have an elite that has captured the state and will not let that happen soon.
But Samira, we've been talking about those reforms since, thereabouts 2012. It's, 10 years or so now of talking about reforms for Somalia. Why isn't it kicking in?
Like I mentioned, it's just the political elite. You have a political elite who are benefiting from the status quo, and for them to let go of any little bit of power, they need to see the benefits that come with that. So I really also think that 2012 to now is a short time, and that there's been some progress, but there's still not been wide-scale progress. We've completed a federal map between 2012 and 2016, 2017. We didn't have the federal member states. In the last 5 years, I think what was really significant was just security sector reform and economic reforms, but there was not much space in the political arena. We're hoping that Hassan Sheikh coming back to office will now fast track this, but I think we're still some time away.
Dr. Kaneji, are we seeing much progress of the Somalia of today from the Somalia of 2017, of 2012?
The Somalia of 2012 was significantly weaker when it comes to capacity. Institutions were virtually non-existent. The security for in terms of the rule, implementing or enforcing the rule of law was a mere, pipe dream. Al-Shabaab was still, very, very strong increasingly, not to discount the fact that it still poses perhaps the most existential threat that Somalia faces today. But the country has made marked improvements, of course, with the help of the international community and the African Union mission in there. But I think, it's still far from where it should be. In fact, more expected that it will be in a much better position. Frankly, today. However, I think the new president can build on the progress made thus far, and he seems to be succeeding in attracting international goodwill, not just based on his rhetoric, but actually on his past record. he's less polarizing and less confrontational, less polarizing internally and less confrontational regionally. And so I think this is going to attract a lot of positive attention and potentially re-engagement within Somalia by the international community as well as regional countries.
Professor Lawrence, there seems to have been some sort of, fatigue when it comes to Somalia from the international community. When you hear what Dr. Khanejer is saying, that perhaps there is a new dawn, what is the feeling of the international community?
Unfortunately, the international community doesn't pay attention to both Somalia and the Horn of Africa enough. They're distracted, as many people have said, not just by Ukraine and the various global crises caused by or exacerbated by the effects of the Ukrainian crisis on the global economy, such as the food distribution crisis and the energy crisis and inflation, which was exacerbated. But there are regional situations. There's the Ethiopian war, there's the Kenyan drought, there's multiple coups. I think I've counted 9 or 10 coups in the last 18 months or so across the Sahel region and the adjacent areas. So I think the world is distracted, the globe is distracted. I think we've raised maybe 15% of the needs that Somalia has with its, food crisis and impending famine. There's a debate about whether or not we call what's going on in Somalia now a famine. I think famine early warning, something a lot of my friends on, has failed us right now in Somalia. I think we probably already should have made some declarations giving the food precariousness right now, and the 300,000 children that are on the verge of starvation, already dying in some cases. So all of that means, I think once the international mechanisms of alarm start ringing for Somalia, there'll be more international goodwill, but we're not there yet.
Right. They elected Hassan Sheikh Mohamud as the country's 10th president, but he previously served as well as president from September 2012 to 2017. Do you think he will be facing the same issues he faced 5 years ago?
Well, yes and no. Yes, in terms of the political context and the overall basket of problems facing Somalia are quite similar. But some things have evolved. Certainly a drought famine situation, as I was mentioning earlier, is significantly worse and maybe even worse than 2011. Certainly the international and regional geopolitical scene has changed. I think the main thing to say about this president is that he knows a lot of people in the international community. He has relationships inside and outside the country, so he can hit the ground running. And because of his positive reputation in many circles, that means his honeymoon period might not even be 3 to 6 months, as my colleague said, but some people are saying maybe even a full year, given the amount of problems that Somalia is facing.
Right. Well, Samira, the politics of Somalia, because it is clan-based, is really a delicate balance, as you put it there. How delicate is this one going to be, though?
I think it's very delicate. There's 2 major clans that really capture the state. It's either one or the other. President Farmajo belonged to one. President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud belonged to the other. I think President Farmajo, there was this campaign that it would not be his clan, no matter who stood from any other community, would not be his clan that would make it back to the presidency. And so I think we're divided, and the important thing is President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud has to really work with the federal member states and reunite those federal member states, especially from opposing clans. And I think he's showing every intention to.
All right. On that note, we're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we'll have more on Somalia's new leader and the daunting tasks he faces as he pledges to steer the country towards peace, reconciliation, and stability. To stay with us. Welcome back to Talk Africa. Now let's continue with the discussion. Still with me are Samira Gaid, joining me there from Nairobi. From Mombasa, Dr. Hassan Kaneje, who is the director of the Horn International Institute. And also joining us from Washington, D.C. is Professor William Lawrence. Dr. Kaneje, let me come to you though. What do you think President Hassan will handle differently?
One thing he's made it a priority to improve relations with its neighbors, and that is important, because most of Somalia's neighbors also happen to be troop contributing countries to the African Union mission there, which is now a transitional mission in Somalia. Yes, second, he has a consistent record, especially when it comes to fighting the Islamist insurgency in Somalia. And so it is hoped that because of this history, he's going to be able to have a more robust approach and engagement with other partners in combating the Alshabab. But also critically, this is a seasoned politician. He's tried and tested, and with a slew and a forest of the network that he has, both in the region and internationally, I think he's likely to register a lot more success in getting certain things done, as opposed to rather very isolated and lonely President Farmajo, who just lost the presidency a week ago.
Well, Samira, you have served as a special advisor to the Prime Minister of Somalia, Hassan Ali Khair, and you've been, intricately involved in Somali politics. How do you think President Hassan, though, will handle issues? How different will this be from his, from the administration between 2012 and 2017 when he first served?
I think it will be definitely very different from President Farmajo's term. President Farmajo, adopted the mentality of winner takes all. President Hassan Sheikh has been in the country. He understands the context. He had his first term. He made some mistakes, and he has made it clear that he learned from those mistakes. So like everyone has mentioned, he is a seasoned politician. He has the networks and the connections with the international community. The only challenge that I see for him is he has a huge number of people that supported him that need to be accommodated. He got 52 votes in the first round, which means eventually when he won with 200 plus votes, he got votes from his opposition members who joined ranks with him. He has to appease quite a number of them. The trend has been that if you're not accommodated, then you become a very formidable opposition member. So I think the only challenge that faces him is really how to reunite the losers and keep the ball moving. But in terms of experience, in terms of knowing where the challenges are, I think he's best placed.
If you put politics aside, Samira, and you look at the challenges facing the country, and Professor Lawrence talked about those challenges having evolved. Have they evolved? What is the situation on the ground?
Definitely. I would speak very closely to the security situation. President Hassan Sheikh in 2012 joined when AMISOM was expanding, the African Union was expanding, new troops were joining, they were able to conduct many offensive operations. He's now becoming president in a drawing down mission. It's now been called the ATMIS transition mission. The numbers are going down. We're now at 19,000. We expect in 9 months for them to start cutting down numbers. So the security situation, specifically when it comes to collaboration with the African Union, has changed. Al-Shabaab has become more resilient. It's now, a money-making organization. It's bidding its time, just like the Taliban in Afghanistan. There's been comparisons with that. Security sector reform. We've had a more professionalized security forces over the past 4 or 5 years, but a more politicized security sector. And so just on the security sector, it's very challenging. So when you look at it in terms of politics, when you look at it in terms of economy, there's many more challenges he's facing now than in 2012.
Right. Professor Lawrence, it is quite telling, though, that the Al-Shabaab has, remained so resilient all these years, because much of the country is still being held under Al-Shabaab, authority. I mean, do Somali forces have the capacity to deal with Somalia's security situation? And exactly why is Al-Shabaab so persistent?
They have the ability now to defend what they have. But I don't think they have the ability yet to retake these outlying areas of the country, particularly with the economic and humanitarian aggravations that we've been talking about. Al-Shabaab is resilient for a lot of reasons. Part of it is it gets spillover from other international conflicts. I mean, its original leaders were coming from the Afghanistan and Iraq conflicts. There's other spillover coming now as other conflicts wind down and send fighters in that direction. There are Americans and British fighters. And then, of course, there are the local elements, particularly from one clan, Somalia's largest clan, but that there's a lot of the way I teach it in my class on security is that the growth of these insurgent groups is a function of governance and economics. And when governance and economics get worse, the growth happens. And so while I do believe there is the resilience that my colleague Samira was talking about, and there's this growth of resources related to skimming off of piracy and other things, I also believe that there can be an effective strategy to weaken Al-Shabaab, including carrots and sticks. And lately I've noticed, for example, defection from Somalia as Shabab took actions which alienated its own members. And so if you have the right combination of carrots and sticks, both to regions and to Shabab members itself and its recruiting mechanisms, they can be defeated over time.
Samira, you're watching this from inside Somalia. Do we know what President Hassan's strategy of dealing with the Al-Shabaab will be? And do we know how different that will be from 2012?
I believe even in 2012, he did have a very good strategy. He worked on high-level defections. He also worked on the offensive push. I think they're planning on the same approach, where there will be pressure and then also talks with the group. And so, the National Security Advisor, who has been a three-time National Security Advisor, has been developing this plan. And I believe that, it will not be just negotiations. Negotiations alone will not achieve much, as the group has the upper hand at the moment, but there needs to be sustained pressure on the group.
All right, Professor Lawrence, U.S. President Joe Biden has reportedly authorized the redeployment of U.S. troops to Somalia. And this reverses an earlier decision by, former President Trump, where he removed all forces deployed there. What is the direct implication of this new deployment, and what exactly informed this new redeployment?
Well, to be completely honest, both the Trump withdrawal and the Biden redeployment had a lot more to do with American domestic politics than anything going on in Somalia, and notwithstanding that the effects, are real. Now, the redeployment is good for several reasons for the United States, including that it's safer and cheaper to simply station American trainers and troops in Somalia than it is to move them in and out, which is dangerous and expensive. And it was the American public was fooled a little bit as Trump moved troops around, they thought they were going from Germany to home, but they were going from Germany to Poland, or they thought they were going from Somalia to home, but they were going from Somalia to Kenya. So it was a bit of a political bait and switch. But when it comes to Somalia's needs, I think to sort of reprise what we've been discussing about, on the one hand, the security transition that's going on and the security response has to be robust, but that's not enough. And so in addition to the 50 troops currently guarding the embassy and American personnel, and the 450 coming back in for training and other purposes, we also need that increasing security in Mogadishu and wherever security is increasing to create, let's say, humanitarian corridors or opportunities for further outreach into Somalia, to show that the choice should be towards a government that distributes services and not towards an insurgent group that cynically provides such services, but only for its own benefit, let's say.
Dr. Kanejo, of course, many are going to be looking at this and and wondering, how did the troops perform in the first place? What is the region's reaction to this?
The region, first of all, felt that the troop withdrawal was a mistake. And they think even the return of the 500 troops is actually not sufficient. Now, being able to develop capacity for the Somali National Forces or the Somali National Army, as well as the police, is going to take more than 500 troops. In part because the Al-Shabaab is still very strong, but also you need a lot more personnel to give sufficient training to literally tens of thousands of men and women in uniform. Secondly, in the long run, I think what is going to be critical for Somali security is build government institutions, but also be able to revive the economy in a way in which an average citizen can actually have faith in government, as opposed to Al-Shabaab. That the government can be able to provide services that right now Al-Shabaab pretends to be providing to those people, because that vulnerability in ungoverned spaces and pretty much absence of government in much of the hinterland is also what is contributing to the kind of resilience that we see within Alshabab today. And so a more comprehensive strategy is going to be needed outside the securitization of the whole project of being able to fix the problems in Somalia, especially when it comes to the problem of terror.
Samira, how are ordinary Somalis, though, feeling about the return of foreign boots on Somali soil?
Somalis, the average Somalis really do not appreciate foreign intervention. So when you see them, they believe that it must have something to do with resources. It must have something to do with, extracting something from Somalia. That's the average Somali sentiment. But I could say the political elite welcomed it. The former president and the current president welcome it. What it does, it provides space for the government to be able to develop strategies and rebuild its forces. I don't think the governments have taken advantage of that space. It's not just the US troops, but all other training missions support us in providing that space where we can really build up capacity. But let's see if President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud will take advantage of the space that's given with this, not only the troop redeployment, but also the airstrikes for 25 individuals.
All right, we're going to wind up in a moment, and I want to get your final remarks. But as you do that, Professor Lawrence, what would your suggestions be, though, for stabilizing Somalia and enduring sustainability and a return to normalcy after all these decades of turmoil?
Unfortunately, we need a holistic approach, which is broad and deep across the whole society, and building on what my colleague said and I said previously. But we also have crises. We have a humanitarian crisis. We have a security crisis. We're just emerging from a political crisis. So you need short-termist and long-termist solutions. But getting back to what Samira just said, I think in these transitional moments, signaling is very important. And signaling means showing quick progress on issues important to local populations as quickly as possible. And sometimes that means going into community and just setting up a health center, or going into community and working on a local justice issue, maybe land that was stolen or something, and then of course humanitarian and health missions immediately. So you don't have to solve everything all at once. But you have to show that the government is there and cares, and the international community is there and cares. And once the populations can see tangible benefits, even if only one problem is being solved at a time, that can create momentum in the right direction.
Dr. Khaneji, your thoughts?
I think providing band-aid solutions to fundamental problems or just trying to do something for public diplomacy is going to risk Somalia or rather another Talibanization from Somalia if, for instance, a more holistic and comprehensive approach is actually adopted. Because what Somalia needs is not just to build its ability to fight Al-Shabaab, is to build its ability to feed its own people, provide opportunity that has made a lot of young people, very vulnerable to radicalization. And so that is going to be needed, and we cannot continue providing band-aid solutions to fundamental issues and problems in Somalia.
Samira, your view there, and as you give us your suggestions, is there hope internally, though, that Somalia will one day return to normalcy, or is returning to normalcy?
Thank you so much. I think there's a bit of apathy, especially with the return of a former leader, especially because of the last 5 years. There's a bit of apathy when it comes to politics. But I think there is hope that now that we have a former president coming in, that he can hit the ground running. But I would also like to say that people's expectations are not too high. There's a lot to do in Somalia. There's a security situation, the economic situation, the humanitarian situation, and the politics that's very divided. A lot of reconciliation is required. And so we're hoping that he can be slow and steady, but also temper expectations.
All right, a very interesting discussions and insights into Somalia's current predicament. But that's all we have time for on this edition of Talk Africa today. A big thank you to our panel of experts. In Nairobi, Samira Gaid, Regional and Security Analyst for Somalia and the Horn of Africa. In Mombasa, Dr. Hassan Sheikh, Director of the Horn International Institute for Strategic Studies. And in Washington, D.C., William Lawrence, Professor of Political Science and International Affairs at the American University. Do remember you can be a part of this conversation through our social media platforms on Facebook and Twitter, and you can watch this and other editions of Talk Africa on our YouTube playlist. Do join us again next week for more Talk Africa. From me, Beatrice Marshall, and the team here in Nairobi. Until next time, bye-bye.